Well, hello and good evening. Once again, we're here for a Monday night Q&A session. I'm joined this evening by one of our field team, Dean Kinsella. Good evening, Dean.
Good evening, Sam. How you doing, mate?
I'm good, and it's such hot off the press that Dean's not actually made it home from the day yet.
No, my day's not done yet, Sam. And folks out there, I'm still on my way home. I've stopped off at a service station outside of London. So I just set myself up now, and I had a chat with Sam earlier, and I thought it might be a good idea just to mix up something a bit different tonight and put a question to the audience. If anybody can guess which service station that I am in at present, and if they can even add on to that whether I am northbound or southbound, then whoever gets it right will receive, or first person to get it right, will receive a £10 gift voucher from ourselves. So what I'm going to do very quickly, I'm just going to show the camera around, and obviously whoever gets it is a voucher for you. So here we go. I'll give you a little view of where I am. It's very quiet, as you can see. So that's all you're going to get. So for the ones who travel around a lot, might be able to recognise it. I'll give them a clue as well. It's on the M1.
Okay.
The M1 can be quite long, but that's it. That's as far as I'm going to go. M1 somewhere.
So a little bit of a different start tonight from normal, but yeah. just to prove that we are real people. We do travel, and Dean especially, certainly a lot more than me. Out most days, and here's to say he's actually out right now, still not home.
That's it. Contrary to popular belief, Sam, we don't finish early.
So before we get into it, we'll definitely get into some electrical questions tonight. But before we get into it, so we've had a few. We've had Scratchwood North, Watford Gap northbound. Somebody's spotted a lamp that needs fixing somewhere in the background. So okay, right. We'll make a start. So. Hopefully people have had a chance to have a look at the question of the week. So the question this week was, what would you expect the end-to-end resistance to be for a 50-metre run of 2.5 mil squared copper cable when you're measuring that resistance at 25 degrees C? So Dean, this is the kind of thing whereby we've just run in a new circuit, a radio or ring, and we want to measure it to make sure it is continuous. But we also want to be able to compare that result against a value. So this is really the whole idea behind the calculation.
So basically, obviously, for any contractors doing installation work, design and build, the responsibility is on them to ensure that they are complying with the industry guidance out there. There are various tables out there, all very similar, but in different parts of different books. So there's tables available in the IT on-site guide, and they're also available in our NIC ITC guide and site guide as well. So basically what you're looking at is the table which talks about maximum resistance of conductors based at 20 degrees. And the table will be pretty much the same no matter which guidance you are referring to out there. And let's take an example of, let's take a ring circuit is probably the best one. Now, I know because of the tables that if I get a value that the contractor measures, I can quickly determine in my head that length of run. But whether the contractor can do that or not. So basically, for those who've got the books in front of you, you're looking at various tables. So if you're in guidance note 3, it'll be table B1. If you're in the on-site guide, it'll be table A1. It'll be available in the NIC books as well. If you look across the left-hand column, you'll find the conductor CSA area in millimetres. Scroll down till you find the 2.5. Now, some of the tables might have an extra column in there for the CPC, but we'll disregard that one for now and just focus on the live conductor. If you move across to the right hand side, you'll find a value with a point in it, and it should be 7.41. That's the resistance of that particular size, that CSA, in milliohms per meter. So basically what we can do there is we'll do a calculation. Let's say we've got 50 meters of 2.5 for our ring circuit. We know we've installed roughly 50, but we need to take our measurement and then be able to compare it to know we're within reason of what we expect it to be. So take your 50 meters and then times it by your resistance in milliohms, which would be 7.41. Once you times that, you should get a value in milliohms of 370.5 milliohms. Now, what you need to do then for that value of 20 degrees, you need to divide it by 1,000, it's in milliohms. So put the calculation, 50 times 7.41 equals, divided by 1,000, and you should get an answer of 0.741 with a few digits after it. That's not saying 0.74, sorry, 0.37 is 50 meters. Now that tells you that you've got 0.37 million ohms. Now, obviously, your measured value should be pretty much the same as your calculated value. It might be a little bit of difference, but it doesn't have to be drastically out. That means you're on the right track there. Now, what this will also do, this will help you at the design stage, whereas you might have an extra long length of run that you have to install. It might be because there's concrete floors, it might be a large surface area, it could be a double front house, for example. So you need to determine whether one ring circuit or radial circuit is going to be sufficient as 2.5, and that's where this calculation comes in. So all you've got to do before you install it is just take a quick measurement of what you believe your route would be for your ring circuit, let's say. Take that measurement, times it by the resistance 7.41, equal it, divide it by 1,000, and that'll be your calculated length of run. You can then determine then whether you're going to be within the requirements for your R1, R2. Obviously tie that in with your ZE, add them together, and it'll give you a calc ZS to work to. Obviously, if it's too high, you need to reconfigure what size circuit you're going to install, or what size live conductor you're going to install as well. So that's for 20 degrees. That's as far as I've gone for now.
Yeah, and then if you want to factor, because of those resistance per meter tables are based around an ambient temperature of 20 degrees. In our instance, like today, when the ambient temperature is hotter and we need to factor it in, you can do that. So if I just quickly show you that calculation, copper's got a constant. It's called a temperature coefficient of 0.004, which means that for every degrees C rise, it goes up by 4 thousandths of its resistive value. So we've got a 25 over 20, so we've got a 5 degree rise, so our value actually changes by 1.02, which is like a 2% increase, which on our 0.37 is going to give us a rounded value of 0.38. So that's what we would expect. We're installing 2.5 mil, a 50 meter run of it. We would expect to measure a value of 0.38, taking into consideration the accuracy of your meter, but that's at least giving you something to compare it against.
Yeah, I think the only thing you've got to bear in mind, like you said, Sam, the batteries need to be fully charged, your leads need to be nulled beforehand, and we're making an assumption that the copper that they're using is going to give us that value if we did measure 50 meters of it as well. So there's a few little, obviously, variants to take into consideration. Obviously, if your reading is much higher, then you need to do a few little additional checks on your meter first to cancel that out. And then other things you might be looking at is the amount of copper content in your drummer cable, but it pretty much should be the same if the quality is right for the conductive resistance.
Okay. We've got a couple of questions that were hung over from last week. So the first one's a little bit long. So it's about a swimming pool, and the question that came in last week was a heated swimming pool in a customer's garden. The pool heater is remote from the pool in an external shed which is supplied from a TNCS supply. It's RCD protected from the house. There are no extraneous conductive parts in proximity. Should the pool heater be disconnected from TNCS earthing supply and instead be connected to the TT earth rod? So first thing to say is within section 702 for swimming pools there is an advisory note which talks about wherever PME earthing facilities used as a means of earthing for the electrical installation of a swimming pool or other basin, it's recommended that an earth mat or earth electrode of suitably low resistance, e.g. 20 ohms or less, be installed and connected to the supplementary protective bonding. So that's not turning it into a TT system, but it's effectively giving existing TNCS PME earth a very low resistance, 20 ohms or less, reference to true earth. So it's trying to tie the PME earth system again down. So that's the guidance. It is a note, so it's informative only, but it's all based around trying to ensure that the users of the swimming pool, who are likely to be unclothed and wet and therefore have a very low body resistance, it's trying to make sure that they're not going to be susceptible to the impact of simultaneously touching PME earth and true earth. So that's the idea behind it. Now, the question said that the pool heater was remote. It was in a separate building. So if that is electrically isolated from the swimming pool, then you could consider leaving the pool heater on TNCS. But what the question really doesn't tell us about is the swimming pool location. Is it in a building or is it sunk into the garden, so people stepping out of the pool will be in touch with true earth? Is there lighting around the pool, so i.e. have we exported the installation out to the swimming pool location? And if we have done that, then again we'd be advising people to do everything they can to ensure that there's no potential difference. So either TT in it, or as the advisory note says, install an earth mat which ensures that there's no potential or extremely small potential difference between PME earth and our true earth. Anything you'd add to that, Dean?
No, I think you pretty much covered it all, Sam. With the information we've been provided, there's pretty much nothing more we can add on to that I can think of. It's just something you've got to always consider and ensure, if you do come across it, that you do read the guidance available and make sure that obviously you're not introducing that potential.
Yeah. And then one other one which hung over from last week was, can we use the ZS tables in 7671 for 60947-2 MCBs, or do we have to go to manufacturer's data like MCCBs? What's your thoughts on that, Dean?
Yeah, pretty straightforward, Sam. There's no information within BS 7671 for 60947-2 MCCBs, as most people will be aware of. Therefore, you would have to go to the manufacturer of the device. A lot of them do have them available on their websites anyway, in the technical section, and those that haven't, you'd have to go through the technical support and request the information for them.
Yeah.
And then just make sure that at the bottom of the circuit details page, you do record where the information has come from. If it has not come from BS 7671, a lot of contractors missed that one out, because that was a change that came in, and it's gets overlooked. It's in small print. There's a little asterisk usually on the column for the max ZS permitted, and then it does ask you to reference where it's come from if it's not from BS 7671.
Okay. Right, so we'll pick up on some of this evening's questions. So the first one I can see is on an EICR tick list on special locations regarding the presence of supplementary bonding unless not required by BS 7671. Am I right in saying that I would tick it if it was satisfactory and not whether it is bonded or not instead of not applicable.
Okay.
So I think we'd only be not applicable if it wasn't required to have supplementary bonding. So yeah, the first thing to be would be to ascertain based on the location and the requirements for that location in 7671, does it require supplementary bonding? If it doesn't, then that's where we'd be NA in it. If it does, then it would be a consideration of, is it adequate, safe for continued use, in which case we'd be ticking it. Otherwise we'd be looking at giving it one of their classification codes if it was required but not satisfactory.
Yeah, I think the thing to note on that one, Sam, is if you've got 30 milliamp RCD protection for the bath, for a room fitting a bath or shower, then you'd put an NA in that one because you've met the requirements with regards to additional protection. And then if not, then you would put the code that's been recommended in Best Practice Guide 4.
Yeah.
But then the other thing they've got to do is they've got to ensure that they are checking the presence of it, they're checking it correctly, because there's only one correct way of installing supplementary bonding in a bathroom. So the inspector needs to be competent in understanding how that supplementary bonding should be installed as per BS 7671. So don't misunderstand what supplementary bonding is and how it's installed and how it should be checked.
Yeah. Okay. Another question that's come in. When doing an EICR, sometimes I find ZE plus R1 plus R2 gives a different result than measuring ZS directly. Which do I write down on the certificate? So what's your thoughts on that one, Dean?
Well, let's go back to the first part where they said that the values may be different. You're looking at, you might get a difference in the values because your meter is working in different settings to give you a value that, although they're comparative, they are different in their purpose. So you might get a little bit of resistance coming through the meter that might give it a different readings. Also, there's the uplift phenomenon between different meters and different RCDs within the industry. So that's the first one. Yes, there might be a slight difference, but if it is significant, you need to obviously check the compatibility of your meter to the RCD you're testing, the make and brand, etc., which is a different topic altogether. With regards to which one you record, you can record either. I suppose what I would say is, if you're going to do a airflow loop impedance as a measured value, then do it the safest method possible. So if you're testing on a socket outlet, then it's safe to do a live airflow loop impedance test. Therefore, you can record the measured value. But if you take a circuit where there's not a socket present, a lighting circuit or a cooker circuit, your safer option might be to do the ZE and add it to the R1, R2 and record the calculated value. Yeah. If you are going to record the calc value, it's worth noting on a continuation page which final circuits it applies to as well.
Yeah, I mean it's quite often it's totally justifiable that we get a different measured value from a calculated value because, for example, we might have metallic containment which is being used. We might have extraneous conductive parts that have got a bond which have give us an alternative path. So that's the first thing, to sort of look at the installation and to see, are there any parallel paths that you'll actually be measuring when you're measuring ZS. So things like bonding conductors to extraneous conductive parts, earth containment for your installation of support your wiring system. So it's quite common. As Dean says, both ways are acceptable, and safety considerations should be taken into account. All we would suggest is that you're actually showing R1 plus R2 generally or R2 of course, and you're showing ZE normally anyway, so those are part of, and those are recorded elsewhere on your installation certificate or condition report if you're doing a test of an installed spec. So then it's a situation that normally the ZS value would be expected to be a measured one, but just make it clear on the certificate which you've done. Either way are acceptable, but also consider, you know, when you see a difference, take a step back and think, can you justify that difference based on what else is going on within the installation?
Just one quick point on that one, Sam. Obviously R1, R2 has been mentioned there. It's just to reiterate that the R1, R2 must be measured, never calculated. Yeah. Whereas you can calc the ZS under no circumstances should you really be calculating the R1, R2.
Yeah, absolutely.
Recording the calc value.
So another question that's come in. I've just installed a supply ready for an EV charger in a new house and noticed that the tails are 6 meters in length from the meter to the fuse board. Does this need an isolator fitting? Well, the situation is that our regulations do allow us to admit overload protection for tails if the DNO provides a device, which they always do in the service head, but it's the second part of the requirement if they agree to us using it as a means of overload for protection for those extended tails. Now, our experience is once you go beyond 2 or 3 meters that the DNO won't allow you to, and that's when you need additional overload protection, and most people then take the opportunity to fit a fused isolator so they've got an independent means of isolation without having to refer to the DNO. So if you were doing that, obviously those tails are presumably already in and that length of run is already there. Providing you can meet the ZS of the fuse at the load point, so the cutout fuse is providing adequate overload and fault protection, then it's worthy of a comment on your installation certificate, and it's a recommendation that you could put forward to the customer. So it shouldn't prevent you from carrying on with your work, but you know, it's one of those things that should be highlighted in the box on your certificate which talks about comments on existing installation. Would you add anything to that, Dean?
No, pretty much what you said, Sam. Make a comment in your on your certificate in the relevant section, bring it to the client's attention, discuss the option of having installed as part of the work, but just make them aware that obviously it's just been discussed and it's not dangerous, it's just a recommendation only. You don't want to scare them under the client, but yeah, just make it clear of the reason why.
Yeah. Okay, we've got, and it's that time of year again, so I can see hot tub. So we've got a hot tub on its own 32 amp RCD protected circuit, all connected and good. Okay, that's a good start. It sits on its own resin tray on flags. Okay, so we're saying it's insulated from true earth. Customer then fitted a metal framed gazebo over the hot tub, bolted to the ground through these flags, and then wrapped some self lights around this gazebo, plugged into a nearby socket which is also RCD protected. Does this framework need bonding? That would depend very much on if it's extraneous or not. So the advice would be to do a test to see if it is extraneous. Can it introduce earth potential into our installation, or is it just a piece of isolated metalwork? So do your typical test, providing it's safe to do so. Disconnect the incoming earth, measure the resistance from the incoming earth to the suspect metalwork, and see what we're getting. If we're considering that our 10 milliamps is our issue, then we want a resistance greater than 22k. If it is greater than that, then it wouldn't be considered earthy. We wouldn't need to bond it. But if it's lower than that and we're considering a 10 milliamp fault current as being harmful, then anything below 22k should be considered extraneous and therefore would need to be bonded. So do a test on the framework to see if it is earthy.
Yeah, I think obviously if the installer refers to guidance note 8 chapter 6, just to get an idea of what is class extraneous conductive part, then they can have a look at the resistance value to determine whether it does need to be bonded. And I'm just looking at an article now we've got in the portal, in the technical section under downloads. There's actually an article on there for hot tubs. It's actually in the connections number 215 for those of you who might have access to it. So there's a good article in there to refer to.
Yeah, we can hear you loud and clear, Dean, but your picture's frozen, just to let you know, but you're coming through loud and clear.
Okay, no problem.
Okay, we might have a follow-up to our question about the pool. Oh, you're moving again now, which is good. So pool in the ground, if we're saying that's to do with our question about the heat pump, then if the pool's sunk into the ground, so people stepping out of the pool are coming into contact with true earth on grass, etc., then yeah, we would strongly recommend either the earth mat to give us that resistance to PME of less than 20 ohms, or if we can't achieve that, if that's not practical, then consider TT in the swimming pool installation. Let's see what else we've got. EICR sub dB in a group 100 meters from the MET on a TNCS system with localized extraneous conductive parts not bonded. Do any new bonds installed need to be to table 54.8? Yes, so currently if we're looking at a TNCS system, the bonding needs to be to table 54.8, i.e. that's sized based on the incoming earth, the actual pen conductor of the installation, and that's one of those examples where people then actually might find it easier to TT that remote board, so then the bonds only need to go locally back to that board and be sized based around a TT installation, rather than taking TNCS bonds all the way back to the MET of the installation and have them sized based on the size of the pen conductor. So again, this might be a follow-up to the question about EV. I cannot see any mechanical protection for the tails. They were installed by the contractor who wired the new house. The house is only a month old, so it might be worth a conversation going back to the customer to ask them to get confirmation from the original contractors. It's possible, if we're talking about a large housing estate, it's possible that the DNO agreed to it, in which case there was a blanket agreement, but yeah, it's certainly worth mentioning to the customer, and perhaps start that conversation with the original contractor. Have they got confirmation from the DNO that they permitted their protective device to be used for protection of those long tail runs? If not, then it's really questionable whether that's compliant with 7671.
Yeah, the only other thing to add on to that, Sam, is obviously your wiring methods as well, depending on the supply tail, what type of wiring it is. If your wiring methods meet BS 7671 as well, it just seems strange for a new build. The tails would be so long to be far away from the MET.
Yeah, although sometimes now, we've actually seen, because especially in instances where the supply is actually put in first, and then the orientation of the building changes, and now all of a sudden the main board is a long way from the service head. So it's certainly possible. Okay, we'll look for a last one, because we're all melting here a little bit, and there's a few people saying. One that I don't know, I'll throw it over to you, Fluke. Are you much of a Fluke meter guy? Got a question that someone said, do you know the difference between the RE and the IK symbols on my Fluke meter? I have to admit, I'm not too familiar with Fluke instruments. You might have to go to Fluke themselves for that.
They can download the manuals off the internet. They are available on the Fluke website for the different models. So it should explain further in them PDF what them digits mean.
Yeah. And so if the guy tested from the Met to the gazebo and proved to be extraneous, would you then take a main protective bonding conductor outside to the gazebo? Well, you would, if it proved to be extraneous, you are going to have to bond it. So yeah, you would need to, and I believe it was, did we? I'll just quickly go back to that. Was it a TNCS? So it didn't actually say in the question what the earthing arrangement was, but yeah, if the gazebo did prove to be extraneous, it would need to be bonded.
Yeah, chapter 54 for your minimum CS area with a TNS or TNCS as well.
Okay, one last question that we'll finish on tonight then. Is it acceptable to double up 2 circuits, smokes and lights, into one MCB 60898? There's one of our fundamental principles that the regs talks about, division of installation, and in that section 314 it does say that every circuit should have its own way in the consumer unit. So it would certainly be non-compliant. You'd have to consider it also very strongly as to, just because it's non-compliant, does it make it any less dangerous? The problem is, by doubling up, that means a fault with the lighting circuit, you could lose your supply to the lights. Although I appreciate most smoke detectors are normally fed from an existing lighting circuit, so that you can see whether it's energized or not, because we specifically want it to be fed from a frequently used lighting circuit. So yeah, it's acceptable. It would certainly be something worth noting, because people without knowledge, when they see 2 separate cables going into a single protective device, start to wonder, is it a ring, what is it? So it would certainly warrant some additional labelling. And yeah, strictly speaking, 314 says every circuit should have its own way in the board.
Yeah, the only thing to add on to that is whether you're installing the board or not. Have you designed installation to suit the amount of circuits, or is it just an additional circuit you're installing and there's not enough spare ways on the existing board? Again, like you said, note it on your certificate if you are just doing an additional circuit to the existing installation. Just put a note on explaining the situation, and then identify it as per the regulations.
And we've got one of our colleagues, thanks Dan, one has come in with our Fluke question. So Dan's told us that RE, earth resistance, and IK is associated with prospective fault current, so either prospective short circuit current or prospective earth fault current, so it indicates a short circuit current. So thanks very much for that, Dan. Always appreciative. Okay, we'll just very quickly we'll rattle through, because I'm absolutely melting, and I'm sure a lot of you guys are as well. So what did we have for our guesses in terms of where is Dean? So he's not at Football Range, he's not Watford Gap northbound, he's not Forest East services.
No.
Let's have a look. Newport Pagnell north.
No.
Let's have a look. I think we kind of stopped and got serious then, which is what we wanted to do in all truthness. London Gateway Services.
No.
Okay. All right. We'll call it all that tonight. It's been really good. Thank you very much again for posing your questions, and like we did at the start of today, if there are any that have come through that we haven't got around to answering, we'll try and roll those into next week. We hope everybody is safe and well coming out of tougher regulations and rules that we have in most parts of the country. So hopefully things are getting back and better to normal as much as we can, and appreciate that everybody's sweltering in this heat. But I suppose we shouldn't complain in this country. But yeah, a little bit cooler would be better for me, certainly. Okay, yeah. Thanks very much. Thanks again, Dean. Do you want to put people out of their misery?
Where I am. I'm in Northampton Services, which is the road chef, and I was going southbound.
Oh.
So
going home.
There we go.
Going home. No, it's always good.
Going home. I hope.
Okay. Well, thanks very much, Dean. Always good to speak to you.
You're welcome. Cheers, folks.
And
see you again soon. Have a nice evening. Don't get too hot.
Yeah. Just before we disappear, there's no Wire webinar this week. The next one is Wednesday week, which is the 28th of July, and that will be our EV charging wire. So a thorough run through on some of the things in Amendment 1 and some of the impacts of those changes have. So if you haven't already, please get onto the website and register for that. That will be 8 p.m. on Wednesday the 28th of July. Okay.
I'm going to register right now for that, Sam, before I leave.
Even before you leave.
First.
That's good. It's always good. Hey, thanks very much, everybody, and hopefully
pleasure, as always.
We'll see you again next week.
Be safe.